Hello, and welcome to Embracing Your Earth Journey. I'm your host, Stephanie Briggs, and I am thrilled to be speaking today with my dear friend, Miik Wells. Welcome, Miik.
Hello, thank you.
I'm so excited to introduce Miik to those of you who don't know him yet. So spelled M-I-I-K, pronounced Mike, amped like a mic. I will attest to that. This Black Indigenous man is a father of a 7-year-old, a lover of adventure and laughter, and a facilitator of learning. Miik is the Cheshire catalyst, superconductor, and a cultivator of inner equity, an orientation, process, and practice of presence. His dynamic interactive approach to programming and his ability to connect with a wide spectrum of individuals and groups spans children to elders, poor to affluent, developmentally typical to developmentally challenged, etc. With a passion for continuous learning and deep connection, Miik creates a connective tidal wave in everything he touches, activating a magical dimension of curiosity, playfulness, possibility, and evolution. And I am, again, so excited. I've been getting to know Miik over the last year and change as part of the Liberatore leadership and facilitation training community that is hosted by Andrea Renee, one of our other speakers. And it's been such an amazing journey in our group, and just getting to know Miik in particular. Always, Miik, appreciate your presence and the fun that you bring, and also just like the way that I've learned from you about being with more of who I am, and especially like, different parts of me that I tend to not want to connect with. So I'm excited to dive in.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So to get started, as I mentioned in your bio, you are a steward of something called inner equity, which you describe as an orientation, process, and practice of presence. And I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about how and why that came to be, and like how inner equity is like an expression of you and your Miikness.
I like that, Mikeness. Ooh, inner equity has been really decades in the creation. One of the stops along the way that really started bringing it closer to the surface. So it was like planted as a seed and then started bringing it closer to the surface I was a part of a mentoring organization, and was being asked to do a facilitator training for some of the mentors, to be able to step into their own facilitation for the program, and then outside of the program as well. And as I started thinking about it, you know how when you have kind of a zone of genius, something that you do naturally, to be able to explain to somebody how you do it, it's like, oh, now I have to examine, I have to take some things apart. It's like breathing to me. How do you explain to somebody how to breathe? But I was able to go in and really look at how I like to be facilitated, how I do facilitate, and so much of it was multidimensional. There's things that I do with people's bodies. There's things that I do with people's emotions. There's things that I do with framing how people think. And so trying to figure out a way to do a training that not only is interactive like I like to be, but also is able to offer to someone else how it is that they move or direct or frame people's bodies, emotions, and minds to be able to get the full multidimensional experience, was my entry point into, oh, there's a lot more to me than just a personality, than just my words, than just even the way that I think about things and put them down on paper to be able to facilitate. And then fast forward a few years later, and I was at a winter gathering that happens on Whidbey Island. It's an annual thing, and they have this open space container where you're able to say like a title and description of something that you want to offer people, and then they just show up or not. At the time, I called it internal equity, and I was just thinking, like, multiple dimensions of self and bringing them more into balance, taking social justice work that we do outside and bringing it into ourselves. I was thinking maybe 5, 6 people, 15 people ended up showing up. I didn't have anything planned. I was thinking about having a conversation about it, but then when 15 people showed up, I'm like, okay, I think I have to do a workshop. So what are we gonna do? And what I did was on the fly created, or not created, the seed finally broke through the dirt, and I did these exercises with people that presence their bodies, presence their emotions, presence their mind, and had people share about it and really put voice to those different parts of themselves. And so that's how it's really come to be. When it comes to how it is me, there's so much of me that is interactive, experiential, learning, and joyful that I like to play on so many different levels. I like to solve puzzles with my mind. I like to feel the whole spectrum of emotions. And I like to really get jostled and move and play with people physically. And so with me, it's looking at how do I bring all of those dimensions forward and forefront and not prioritize one over the other, and bring them all into a balance and into a harmony. And that's just who I am when I'm firing it all on all cylinders. When I'm the most me, it's when all of my dimensions are able to play with myself and in turn with everyone else, and everybody else gets invited into it as well. So that's yeah, that's kind of like the nutshell of inner equity and how it is me.
Yeah. So it sounds like, it's a way of working with, as you said, like the multi-dimensional like level of ourselves. And I'm curious, like, to know more about that. Like, what are these different dimensions? I think you started to mention what they were, but could you tell us a little more? Like, what are we becoming present to?
Ooh, I like that. What are we becoming present to? So I start off with inner equity in terms of the orientation part of orient process practice. The orientation is really, I start with our with the 4 that are popular that we that we kind of generally know about: our physical self, our emotional self, our mental self, and then I also present relational self. The relational self being the connective part of us that either is drawn toward or retracts from things, beings, people, um, plants, animals, etc. But we get drawn in or pulled away, and that's an aspect of our being, especially as social beings, interconnected beings, that that our culture in the U.S. don't see either erases or diminishes so much that we are so out of practice, and that part of us is atrophy. So those are the dimensions that get presence, and their presence through our consciousness, the place in us that has focused attention, that makes choices, and that really has the privilege and the capability to highlight, to suppress, to manipulate, to contort those different parts of ourselves as we try to bring ourselves forward. So our bodies, how much do we pay attention to our body? How much do we allow our emotions to flow when we're feeling that particular emotion? How much do we allow our mind to venture into various places when our society is telling us, oh no, you're only supposed to think in this particular box right here, but our minds want to travel all over the place. So those are the dimensions that I present, but then I also recognize there's a whole universe of dimensions inside of us. We have our spiritual dimension. We have a lot of energetics. We have so many other things that we can have access to. But to start with our walking every day, how we interact with people, I start with those 4.
Mm-hmm. So I love, again, like how you mentioned, like the universe that we have within us. And like, yeah, it feels like a way to really explore. And I'm curious, like you've kind of started to allude to this, but like what what makes inner equity like a liberatory practice?
Mm. um, the thing that really touches me with liberation and how it works through me with inner equity is there's so much of our attention that's focused on the outside and trying to shift the outside so that we can be okay. And and especially in social justice work and liberatory work, we're looking at how our systems are set up uh, to disconnect us from ourselves and from each other. How inner equity for me is liberatory, and how I've experienced other people being liberated by it is offering those parts of ourselves a voice and an expression that we actually pay attention to, that we haven't traditionally or through our lives been told that we're allowed to. And so in U.S. culture, the mind is prioritized into mental. This is the first and foremost, is the only thing that really truly matters, and the body just kind of gets in the way. But it's the second thing, because it's like, okay, you can't necessarily um, fully erase the body. It's there. It's kind of undeniable. We can disassociate from it into our mind because it's that privileged place, but we have that body. And then emotions are messy and it's hard to control, and it takes so much energy to suppress and all these things. And so there's that, and then we have, and then relational. We talk about our indigenous cultures, our indigenous peoples, our indigenous ways of always being in relation to everything and everyone and every being that's on this planet, and even in this universe. There's all these connections that are there, but that is just really it's erased, it's disintegrated, it's dissolved. And so as we have that hierarchy that's being created, our minds are dictating to these other dimensions of ourselves what they're allowed to do and how they're allowed to express. And if those other parts of ourselves are being oppressed and suppressed and dictated to and micromanaged and everything like that, we're not fully being able to presence the fullness of the being that we are. Like a tree is a tree is a tree, a flower is a flower is a flower, a panther is a panther is a panther. And it's fully in and of itself alongside every other being that's around it. And as humans, we contort ourselves to the place that we're not fully exactly the being that we are. And in inner equity, being able to bring voice to my body. My body says to me, "Hey, you don't drink enough water. You don't give me enough. You don't give me enough water. You don't move me enough, and you don't allow me to rest." And those messages in my conscious self, I suppress those things so that they don't happen. But if I allow that in, which is what my inner equity practice does, is allow me to listen to that and pay attention to it, then I can see, oh, this is how I'm affecting my body. Am I going to do something about that? Am I going to make different choices? Am I going to give my physical self what it needs to be able to thrive and to be more of itself? Because it's a part of me. And then these other dimensions of myself, am I going to be paying attention to these voices, to the impact that my choices are having on these different parts of me, so that I can be more full? I can build more trust with these dimensions of me. I can have more of me, which is more liberatory. I'm not strictly being dictated by what I learned as a little one from limited systems and limited ways of thinking. I'm paying more attention to the fullness of who I am, which brings me to more me, which is more liberatory. And then the more that other people do it, and the more I'm connected to other people that are doing it, the more liberated all of us
Hmm. So I love the example you gave about like the messages of your body, and um, I want to hear more examples. And also, I just want to, yeah, like I guess I have another question first, which is like, why is it important, like that we be able to like bring more of our beingness
are.
into presence, into action? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's important because there's this adage that, I mean, of course there's nuance, but it's as within, so without. So the ways that we have these systems of domination in this imbalanced distribution of resources that happen on the outside, and we can point to people, we can point to systems, and we can point to collectives and organizations and institutions and things like that. When we pull ourselves in, we have a similar, a parallel reflection happening on the inside. We have this power, we have this privilege, we have this system, and we have this domination that then has that distributes our resources in an inequitable way. There's so much more attention that's paid to let's build up the mind and let's make the frameworks and everything like that, and then the resources for being able to allow my emotions to be how they are. An example would be if in a moment I'm angry, there's so many messages from outside that say anger is not okay. Anger is the enemy, anger is toxic. And so what I do with that is then I make it an enemy and I push it off to the side and I push it down so much that it ends up becoming volcanic and it has to erupt rather than just allowing that message to come. Maybe my anger is signaling that there's something that I need to protect. What is that? That's just, it's information and it's energy for me to flow and to allow to have happen. Not destroying, but just as information and as an expression of who I am. When we think about the imbalanced distribution of resources on the inside and are able to take care of those, it opens up more possibility and more imagination for us to really sort through how does that work on the outside? How do I presence more of my being in a way that if I'm in a room with a whole bunch of folks and the energy is being imbalanced in who gets to have the energetic resource of a room, who gets to have the verbal time in the room, who gets to take up energetic space in the room. I get to presence. This is the way that we can shift that so that we can have more even distribution. And that's just an energy in a room of learning. But we can also expand that to be the resource of land, the resource of air, the resource of water, the resource of food, where there's all these different things, these different ways where if I know how to be equitable internally, I can presence that and I can bring that sort of awareness and practice to others externally. And the more that we're all able to do that, the more we could actually be able to track, all right, we're all connected in this way. Our physical selves, our emotional selves, our relational selves, our resource selves, we're able to distribute the resources in a way that we all can thrive. We all have a voice. All of our needs are taken care of. And it's
Okay. So I'm really interested in what you've been saying about resources and like internal allocation of resources. Like I literally never thought of it that way. Even though I've experienced inner equity before, and maybe you shared that at the time, but it didn't like land until just now. And so I'm feeling like I want to ask you actually to just like what does equity mean? So we're like actually on the same page here.
Right. Equity is really about distribution of resources according to need, and also in that equation, having resources to be able to thrive. So there's a survival level where it's like, okay, I have enough that my being isn't compromised, that I'm not deteriorating in terms of just deteriorating. So I'm maintaining an equilibrium. And then there's also these resources that give us more, so that more possibility is open, more creativity is open, the evolutionary spark is able to be followed. There's so much that is not available to us when we're trying to survive, that just flips over to, okay, what more can we actually do? Now that I'm okay, what more is possible with what resources we have left over? We have so many resources on this planet that can nourish us and get us all that are on this planet to thriving like 100 times over. We have the capacity for that. Equity for me is recognizing what is it that we actually need in terms of our species and in terms of our interconnectedness with other species on this planet, and then being able to distribute resources in a way that covers and that feeds and that nourishes us all. So when I think about equity, it's we all have enough. All dimensions of myself, when I think about it internally, all dimensions of myself have enough. Now there's a store of more. What more can happen with that? I don't have to hoard because there's always going to be more. We know how to be intergenerative with that. So yeah, whenever that question comes, and I remember because I was on Andrea Renee's podcast last year, and they asked me the same question, and it's a different answer every time because it's just an ever evolving definition for me, and it's more of a felt sense than an intellectualized definition.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That is helpful, and again, I'm like thinking of like what you were sharing earlier about our minds and how our minds are like privileged in our dominant culture, and like we kind of like try to, I know, well, I'll just speak for myself. Like I oftentimes try to control the other parts with my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so it sounds like our minds are very much like programmed with like all the oppressive shit from that dominant culture. So then like it's like our minds are like become our internal oppressor.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so it sounds like this is a way to start to dismantle that.
Yes. And even with mind, there's a tricky piece to mind because there's the word, some people use the word ego. I like to use the word mental because mind for me is way more expansive and it's a lot more expansive and deep than we in this culture understand it to be. And what I feel like we have replaced mind with is mental, and mental is a very smaller is a smaller version. It is the systems, it's the frameworks, and this is how I understand, and it's more tied to how we can consciously feel comfortable about certain things, and that's where the programming comes in, where there's a lot of zeros and ones, and if then this then that, and binary, and all these different things that get to a place that's more machine-like. And I feel like that we have our minds shaped and crafted and manipulated into a machine-like framework that then we use to dictate what the mind is allowed to do, what the body is allowed to do, what the emotions are allowed to do. But yeah, it is a way to, if we have more voice and we have more expression from different dimensions, the machine-like framework can't handle. There's no way that our mental can handle the multidimensional, dynamic, kinetic, energetic flow of life. And so to be able to dismantle that, then it gets us more into that broader mind that can actually move with everything else and isn't prioritized over the other dimensions of ourselves. And so yes, it is a dismantling practice.
Mm-hmm. And like you've said, it's a process. So that's like takes us out of the like the white supremacy culture of like, we're just looking for the end goal and like what we can complete and be done with it and tie it up in a bow. That actually this is like a practice that it can like shift from moment to moment, right?
Right. Yeah, that practice piece is really important. There's so much that we don't really even realize that we've got. Everyone that's on this call, or most of the people that are on this call, have had probably 20 years before now of practicing these systems of domination and how the systems of reward and punishment and this is okay, this is not, and you're this or that. You must be in this box or you're bad. All these different things, and that's a practice. We've been doing it every single day, every single moment for these 20 plus years, and then we find ourselves here and are looking for, oh, well, there's this momentum of a boulder that's rolling downhill. So if I just snap my fingers and I think this certain way, then it's going to be all different. Like, oh, there's actually a practice of doing something completely different and not necessarily knowing what the end goal is, if there is an end goal, if things can actually change. But if we practice this long, this one way of being, if we're going to present something else, we have to practice that as well. Every single moment, every choice that we make, every single day, with the same people, with different people, with ourselves, I'm going to go through a practice of drinking water this many more times a day. After 20 years of water, sodas and juices and all kinds of other things, that's fine. But then coming to, oh, water is actually important. Now I have to get into not a habit, but a practice of hydrating in that way. So that's just one example of a way that we need to practice. And that's just like a physical practice. The energetic, the emotional, and all these other things, there's other ways that these parts of us want to express themselves and need to express themselves to be able to be back into an equilibrium or a thriving place. That takes a whole lot more practice. It's multidimensional practice.
Mm-hmm. And is this something that like everybody needs to practice, or like what are some ways like I can tell if like this is something that I could spend some time with? Like, how do I tell if I'm like suppressing some of these inner voices?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I would say that everybody does, even the most enlightened of us. Because to live in this time, to be in the systems that we're in, to live with other people is to navigate our own and others' reactions, responses, and conditional ways of being, and which inevitably have us move away from this interdependent voice and being that we are. We're this interdependent being, and I just know for myself when I go into a space, there's some unwritten rules and some that are written that I'm not allowed to bring a certain aspect of me to that room. Whether I'm not allowed to bring my emotionality to it, I'm not allowed to bring my sensitivity to it. I'm not allowed to bring my physical presence to it. I'm not allowed to bring how intelligent I am into it. Whatever it is, there's a way that I've done, whether it's slight or humongous betrayal or suppression of a dimension of myself. And for me, I found that inner equity is what I've been kind of moving into is it's a dynamic meditation. It's a moving meditation. It's not, for me, it's not a sitting and being mental or mindful about it. It's not mindfulness. It's more like beingfulness, or it's more like it's presence. And using the powers of our own concentration, using the powers of our own awareness to be able to move to, so let me check in with me. Let me see what I'm not hearing of my body. Let me see what I'm not paying attention to in my emotions. Let me see what I'm not paying attention to in terms of myself. If I'm curious enough and I'm asking those questions and I'm really paying that much more present attention to me, then I will find those places that, oh, this is what I'm neglecting. What do I need to do? What does this part of me need? And what can I do to make choices in order to honor that?
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like this requires like kind of like pausing, right? And like slowing down to be able to listen in and see like what's here.
Yo, yeah. One of the tricks of the trade of our systems of domination is urgency, fast, quick. It's like when we're moving fast, we revert back to what we've practiced, right? So we've practiced these over 20 years of separation and distance and disassociating and everything like that. When we quicken things up, those things are right there readily available to us. And there's not a lot of newness and a lot of different choices that we're going to make because we're going to stick with those things that are automatic for us or the things that feel safe and comfortable for us. And so being able to breathe deeply, to be able to slow down, to take a pause, even the slightest pause before jumping right back into the speed allows for another voice, a quieter voice to be heard, a distant voice to be heard, or even a yelling one that's been drowned out by all the speed to finally be able to be heard. But yes, there's a slowing down, but there's also a dropping in. I know, like for me, emotional self. I've been playing around with how people presence it. Some people see or feel color in emotion. Some people hear sound that's associated with an emotion. And I like to use music for myself to presence an emotion. I'll listen to a joyful song, or I'll listen to a song, and I'll allow whatever it was that they were expressing to wash into me and be able to feel what that emotion is. It'll bring me to tears, or bring a big smile on my face, or it'll get me to sink in to some heartbreak that I've had. And even though that's not a slowing down, as it were, it's still a dropping into what's happening and what's going on. So there's ways that we can, if I have a feeling, if I have an emotion, it's like, all right, instead of me suppressing it, let me just allow that to just come full force. And even though it's not a pausing, it's still a dropping in and honoring of what it is that is.
So like, instead of choosing like avoidance, we're choosing to be with.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Nice way to put that.
Yeah. So like, for someone who's new to this, like I don't know if you have like a demo you can do, or like just some example questions, or like how can someone get started?
For me, like the best starting place, there's so many resources out there and so many people that are doing embodiment and somatic practices. And it's one of the most, I guess I can say that and still sit with the nuance in it. But the physical and somatic practices is kind of one of the more accessible practices for us. And so when I go into that, I first do a grounding. And so a grounding would be just kind of starting with the breath and then going through and kind of touching the surface of our bodies. Like, okay, we have the skin. What is the skin like? And maybe we have lesions. Maybe we have sensitivities that have us, just brush lightly or even over, where we can feel ourselves energetically over the top. Maybe we do some kind of like, oh, okay, this is who I really am. This is where I'm at. This is what's going on with me and everything like that. And then, so that's an outside in of body. And then there's also the inside out. There's our bones, there's our marrow of our bones and everything like that. And so then there's a lot of stretching, and there's a lot of kind of really massaging and getting in. It's like, okay, now I'm really presencing. So right now I can really feel my arms. The rest of me is kind of like tingling and everything like that, but I know my arms are here because I've been doing this in front of the camera. But it's this inside out, like what's going on the inside out and outside in. Now I have this presence, and then I would ask myself, if I did this with my whole body, where is it that I feel tension? And then I would move through and feel where that tension is and start moving in that. So, okay, so what is this tension? Why do I have this tension? My tension sits a lot in my lower back. And when I ask into that tension, where does the tension come from? I sit way too much. So there's that. I'm carrying a lot of weight in my belly. My belly kind of protrudes out, and so it bends my spine a little bit. So that brings a little bit more tension. And then there's also some core. So I don't do a lot of activity involving strengthening my core. And so then there's bad posture that also tends to it. And so I'm listening to the questions that I ask myself when I get curious about why this tension? If I go to my knees, why that, why is there discomfort there? And then I would even ask myself other questions like, what is it that my body would like to do that I'm not letting it do? And let my body let me know, like, yeah, I want to walk and I want to stretch. It's like, yeah. And it's not like, sometimes it's a full-on conversation. Like, you remember the other day when you were sitting on the couch and I said, let's go ahead and stand up while we're watching this show and we can actually, do some stretching. And you said, no. Yeah, that was you not paying attention to me. And so there's that. And so it's opening up a dialogue, opening up a conversation, and not even necessarily a conversation. It's asking a question and sitting back and listening to the answer rather than trying to explain the answer away or resist the answer or anything like that. So there's that. It's not necessarily even a dialogue as much as it's a curiosity. What's happening with you? What's going on with you? And I'm going to listen to the answer.
Mm-hmm. And if I discover, or when I discover that I haven't been listening to certain parts, like, does that mean like I did something wrong, or I feel bad, or like, am I in trouble?
It's interesting because I'm hesitating in even saying no. What I want to say is we're going to do what we're going to do with that. So so some of us are going to feel bad. Some of us are going to feel like we've done something wrong, et cetera, and so forth. And as James Olivia of Regard and Right Relationship says, we come by this honestly. It's something like as I was talking about before, 20 years of practice getting us to a place of not listening to that, not listening to ourselves. There's going to be a lot of pain involved. What we're doing in this practice, and in so many ways that we're reconnecting with ourselves, is we're rebuilding trust from a place of we betrayed ourselves for a long time. Even though we didn't know we were doing it, even though we were told to do it and did it, and even when we awoke into it and still continue to do it, there's harm in that relationship happening. And so there's repair that needs to happen. It starts with getting curious. It continues with paying attention to the answers. And then it's about, now how do I continue that repair, that recovery, that regeneration of that trust and of that part of myself? Because that part of myself has been, whichever part we're talking about, it's atrophied because of the choices that I've made to not pay attention to it or dismiss the requests and the asks and the cries for help and the cries of pain that came from that. And so there's a lot of, okay, so how am I going to get that back to a place of, now we have this trust where you're able to share with me what it is that you need, and I'm going to make a choice to honor that and do something about that. And then the more that I'm able to do that, the more that trust gets built, and now we have this relationship back again. So we're going to feel all the feels when it comes to it. We're going to feel horrible that we've done this to ourselves. I know I felt horrible about the things that I've done myself, and I still feel bad about it. And I'm like, okay, yes, I feel bad. Now what? What am I going to do with that? Am I going to continue to make these same choices, or am I going to do something different?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. When I got to experience inner equity, when we were all in Chicago, I was horrified by some of what I discovered about how I was relating to myself, and like especially some of the questions of my body, like what am I making my body do that it doesn't want to do, and also what am I not allowing it to do that it wants to do. And that was a lot to be with.
Right. And that's one dimension too, right?
Yeah.
It's one dimension of a lot of discomfort and a lot of pain. And what's another one of those tricks of, those spiral dimensional tricks about it is those discomforts and those pains that we're not paying attention to ourselves, we then either project onto others, or we erase and dismiss and distance ourselves from in others. So if they have the same kind of things going on with their bodies that we've betrayed in ourselves, then we do something with that. Either we want to go and fix that, and we still ignore ourselves, or since we're ignoring ourselves, we're going to go ahead and ignore that too. And so how connected can we actually be with the other person when we're not paying attention to what's going on with us?
Mm-hmm. So there's that part again about the as within, so without.
Mm-hmm. Right. And what we do with that. What choices are we making for ourselves? Are we making that same choice or the opposite choice? It still ends up being in that binary where we're either doing the same thing to others that we're doing to ourselves, or doing the exact opposite because we know we should be doing something, but we're unwilling, unable, unknowing to do it for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And I think I kind of know the answer to this already, but like, is this a self-care practice? Is this a communal practice? Like,
yes. It very much is. It's a practice that I have for myself, and it's something in terms of talking about my vision, something that I want. Ooh, hummingbird. Um, it's something that I do and need for me to stay connected in terms of being a large Black man in U.S. culture, where me being connected to myself and bringing all of myself to the table feels dangerous to a lot of people. It's like just seeing me can be dangerous, but then feeling the presence of me is. So I've done a lot of distancing, and so my practice is about bringing me together. And I facilitate this in large groups of people, and I have this ability, this multidimensional ability to welcome people into a space that feels safe enough for them to take those internal journeys with themselves, and then also feel safe enough to share it with others. And so it's just as much an personal practice as it is an interpersonal and communal practice, because we are interpersonal and communal beings. And so being able to practice alongside each other and be able to honor each other in that is a part of that journey.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, it kind of feels like that's sort of true of like just our human experience as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
We are here together on this planet, and I know like right now at the time that we're like recording this interview, the pandemic is happening, and it's just like the beginning of, it feels like a whole new level of having to regard the level of connectedness.
Right.
And especially for, you know, those of us who've had the privilege of not regarding that, it's pretty disruptive.
Right. And you can hear it in the ways that people are holding and expressing what their thoughts are about it. It's like, it's all bullshit, and I'm just gonna do what the fuck I'm gonna do anyway, without any regard to the interconnectedness, without regard to the relational self. That relational self that is like, when we individually have sickness, we quarantine ourselves from the rest of the people that we care about. And in that care is right there in relational self. It's who we were drawn to. It's who we know. It's who we care about. It's who we want to do, go the extra mile for, or we want to, if we have an abundance of resource, that we want to share that resource with. And when, with a whole lot of our individualistic mindsets and cultures, it's, no, I got all these for me. And it doesn't matter what's going on with you, even if I care about you, because I don't want to have less than what I feel now comfortable with. And so even thinking about it in terms of communal and global care and relational self, there's ways and times where we're really close together, and then there's ways and times that we breathe out, and we take that time to go, okay, there's something that's not well flowing through our collective system that we need to separate in order to allow it to run its course. And then when it does, then we can come back. But we really only know that there's cultures, there's indigenous cultures that practice that because we know we're in relation to everything and everyone, but to be able to offer to others a practice for themselves and a practice for personally, individually, and collectively, to be able to feel that wider web of relational self to be able to go, oh, when stuff like this happens, this is what we do.
Mhm.
It's not disruptive. It's just another part of what it is that we do as beings.
Yeah. Yeah. So to kind of bring this part of the interview to a close, I have one last question, which is, if you would share like what your vision is for like what's possible with inner equity, like in just more like what are we co-creating like as humans who care?
Mm.
Yeah.
I had a beautiful conversation with Andrea Renee in Andrea Renee's container Liberatore Leadership with a few other folks about interdependence, and that's my I would the vision really involves interdependence. Inner equity for me is a practice of interdependence. It's interdependent presence. It's if I'm present, it's not just my consciousness that's present. It's not just my mind that's present, but it's so many other dimensions of me is present. And to do that, all of those expressions and all of those voices need to come to the same container for me to be able to honor all of it to be present. And the same thing with all of us. And so there's an interdependence that I feel a conscious awareness and experience of interdependence that allows for us to make choices around how we share resources that also honor our interdependence. If I take more and that lessens the capacity of another, then what am I really doing to the whole? I might be affecting the whole in a negative way that has us all be diminished because I'm hoarding or because I'm taking more than what it is that I need. And so for me, the grander vision really is about being able to tune in so much to our beingness that we can feel when our choices are harming ourselves, harming others, harming the beingness that is this planet, and harming our ability to actually live on the planet as well. So I'm looking at equity and resource being shared and so much more thriving and joy and creativity and aliveness and holding and crying because of the so much joy. I'm like I when I think about how much joy can be had when we're in an interdependent, equitable place, it surges tears inside of me, tears of joy.
Wow. Wow. I don't even like know how to respond. That's just thank you. I'll just say that. Thank
You're
you for
welcome.
sharing your vision and yourself and your beingness.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's a wonderful endeavor that you're doing. And I'm so glad that you wanted me to be a part of it.
Yeah, it is my pleasure. And before we finish up, I just want to invite you to let folks know, like for people who are watching and listening, like how can they connect more with you and with inner equity? And like, is there anything in particular that you want to highlight that you've got going?
Yeah. So right now, I'm most present on Instagram at Miik Wells at MIIKWELLS. That's where I present a lot of my inner equity work. I'm also on Facebook at Inner Equity. A peek behind the curtain into me and my Miikness is Miik Drop, MIIKJROP. So you get to see a little bit more of the Miikness. And right now I'm just kind of in this phase of aligning so many more of my online platforms. So miikwells.com is kind of my landing page that I'm having a website kind of created underneath that I need to do some things with. LinkedIn, I'm also going to be kind of doing that. And I'm also going to be putting out a Patreon here pretty soon with some offerings for people to come on board because I I'm in the midst of, and I'm rolling in the direction of creating a movement. It's going to be a movement. There's something happening, a stampede of light, of hearts being lit on fire. That's what I'm up to right
Wow, a stampede of hearts being lit on fire.
now. Mm-hmm.
That's a potent image. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I'm excited for you and for what you're bringing forward, and you to bring all your powerful beingness and your force of natureness into for more folks to connect with and get to know and learn from and grow with, and all of the above. So if you are curious to check out Miik, all of the different links that he mentioned are going to be below this video on Miik's speaker page. Encourage you to check those out and follow along with his work. He's an amazing human. And yeah, so just thanks again, Miik, for doing this interview and being part of this event. It's really, really special.
Yeah, thank you too, Stephanie. I to be a part of your vision, alive together. It's an honor, and I can feel it. It's like it's love, and so I'm so happy to be a part of it. And thanks for all y'all who've chosen to be a part of Stephanie's journey, and then also watch me in talking about mine.
Yeah, I also want to thank everyone who's joining us today. Thank you so much for spending this time with us, and opening to new awareness, new inspiration, and hopefully also like more of your beingness. I encourage and invite you to bring that forward in whatever way is authentic for you. And just want to wish you lots of love and many blessings on your journey. Take care.